Hey up, I'm Guy Kestevan, the Testaman, and this is the Saracen Ariel 30. And I have an apology to make straight away to Saracen, because I kind of led the review with going, this isn't a Downcountry bike, blah, 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 blah. But Drum Brakes, in the comments on that live ride review, pointed out that they don't actually say it's a Downcountry bike. They say it's a double Downcountry bike. And that's clever, because obviously double down is the rating that Maxxis give to their tougher, more reinforced rear tyres. Now, this doesn't have that, but the implication is this bike is more on the downhill side of Downcountry, and that's basically what I spent the rest of the review saying. So, apologies to Saracen, got that completely wrong there. But moving swiftly on, let's have a look at why this is a very good double Downcountry bike, if that is indeed a thing. And also some of the things that are a bit of a buyer beware about making the most of what is a phenomenal value complete bike package now, because it was $249 now and it's now $1699 for these bikes. And as we get close up with some of the componentry on this bike and look at the sort of general toughness of the frame, you'll see that's a pretty good buy, even by today's slightly warped everybody's discounting standards. So, first up, alloy frame, nicely put together in Taiwan for Saracen, you can see. Nice beads on it from the welding, all looks nice and solid. It's a slight, I mean, it's a very similar layout to the Ariel 60, but it's not the same frame set. There's particular differences in the down tube. It's not quite as dramatically curved. It's not as oversized as the down tube on the Ariel 60. You still get bottle cage mounts. You get internal cable routing, although it's not anchored at all inside, so you might get some rattle on rougher trails from that. But moving on to the main pivots, you've got a 37mm, that confused me there because it says 36 Newton meters on the torque. So you've got the torque settings on there. That's a 37mm main pivot axle, and then 28mm suspension hardware up there. And as you can see, it is a whole one-piece rear swing arm on that. So it's a single pivot swing arm, but then you get this tuned rate linkage, TRL suspension system, which again, similar to that used, very similar to that used on the Ariel 60, and developed with Matt Walker, who was actually world champion for Saracen downhill race team in 2020. But if you look at that back end, you can see this is a seriously stout piece of equipment there. Not only is it one piece, but just the girth of those seat stays. When you compare that to something like a Chisel Evo, which is more your classic Downcountry bike, where it's a cross-country bike that's been beefed up. This is clearly something a lot sturdier. And then across the back end here, the first thing we need to talk about, that's a super boost rear end. So most bikes use a boost rear end, which is 148mm. That's 157mm across the axles. Now, again, it's something I kind of made a bit of a fuss about in the live ride review, but you can they're actually pretty easy to find. I mean, the hubs are really easy to find if you need to replace that hub. It's a decent hub, as you can hear, for the amount of noise and the amount of clicks in there. There's very quick pickup on that hub, which gives the whole bike a sense of urgency when you get on the pedals. But even complete wheels, it's relatively easy to find. But it's a sturdy enough wheel anyway. It's 32 holes, DT Swiss rim, eyeletted. So that's a good strong back wheel. And it's also worth noting that on the small and medium bikes you get 27.5, so you get basically a mullet setup there, 27.5, but it's only a 2.3, and I'm holding on this one. I've had to backtrack on a couple of things I've said already, but there's plenty of room there for a bigger tyre. And they do this exact tyre, this dual compound exo protection tyre, in both the 2.4 and the 2.5. And I think it would benefit from the extra rubber in there, because inevitably by going to a smaller wheel size, although it does make the bike a bit easier to flick around, it means it turns in tighter in the rear, which is the whole point of going mullet. And it gives a sense of sort of proportionality to a frame that otherwise uses that same rear subframe on every size of bike. I think, you know, getting a bigger tyre in there would kind of, well, it would just help smooth out the fact that you've got a smaller wheel hitting bumps, and there's, you know, inevitably more force of impact coming through. However, you definitely need to be aware of the kind of general sizing of this bike, because, like I say, I'm riding a medium here, and normally I ride a large in any other bike from other brands. But even this medium comes with a 480mm reach, so it's a hell of a long bike. The large is 505mm reach, and it's not even a super steep seat angle. It's relatively steep, 76.5, and then you've got 65-degree head angle on the front. Relatively short seat tube, 410mm, so that's a 170mm post in there, but plenty of room for a 200. But the only other thing I'd say is that's quite a low head tube on it, 110mm. Because, I mean, this is a relatively old frame, you know, Super Boost, things like that, sort of date it a few years ago, which means stack and having a high front end wasn't, you know, wasn't the fashionable must-have that it is now. So you get a decent stack of washers, you can see there, and I could raise it another centimetre or so just with the washers. But I think a lot of people who are going to be riding really steep, really technical stuff that this bike otherwise thrives on, would benefit from putting a high-rise bar in there. But in terms of contact points, that's something worth pointing out. ODI soft compound grips are a real win, and you've got a race face Affect stem and Ride 35 bar. So a nice little bit of branding up there on the front end. Things I'm not so mad about, that lever on the KS dropper post. It's actually freed up a bit. It was sat for a while after photography, and it seized up a bit, but it's not the fastest post in the West. It's okay, but, you know, keep an eye on the cable lubing on that, because again, that runs internal as well. And also you've got a KMC chain on there, which very durable chain. Doesn't quite shift as well as a Shimano on Shimano setup, and also goes rusty noticeably quicker if you leave it wet and dirty after a ride. So make sure you clean it, make sure you get it lubed up, or you'll end up with a very gingery transmission quicker than you would with a stock Shimano chain. But apart from that, the whole transmission is Shimano, which is a definite win. You know, majority Dior, with just an SLX uptick on the rear mech there, and Dior shifting there, and you've got Dior brakes as well, which yeah, I mean, great lever feel, consistent, very reliable, easy to work on, but you're only getting 180mm rotors on them and only the single pot brake. And again, I think just fitting a 4-pot brake and maybe even a 200mm front rotor would have been more appropriate to this bike, because it is, with the Geo, but particularly the suspension, which I'll get onto in a minute, this is a bike that likes to be properly sent and properly hammered, even on quite big, quite challenging terrain. So it would be nice to have a little bit more stopping power on hand if you suddenly realised you'd overstepped and needed to calm things down quickly. But yeah, like I say, this suspension, I mean, Fox Performance float shock in there. It's an inline shock, it's not a piggyback or anything, but they've got this really progressive kinematic in there, so it feels super sensitive off the start. You've got loads of support in the mid-stroke, and then if you really wallop it, it will go through all the way. It's not one of these bikes where, you know, it says it's 130mm, but you're going to have all on getting 120mm out of it. You do get full stroke when you need it, but it's just, you know, I think pretty much set it up on sag, and it was pretty much bang on from there. Couple of tweaks either way with the rebound, but a really, really well sorted rear end that even when you haven't got it to full travel still feels like a lot more like a sort of 140mm mid-travel bike. So massive credit to the Saracen team and to Matt and all the work they did on that, because, you know, you tend to be kind of drawn into the hype that complex multi-linkage rear ends give you some clear advantage when it comes to control and quality of ride, but this just proves that a really well sorted single pivot setup with the right linkage driver operating the shock to the best effect, plus massive stiffness in all those oversized bearings and that single piece rear end. It really does make a super impressive back end on this bike. Probably the most impressive, I would say, I've ridden in this sort of £2,500 and below category, if we're going off original RRP. And then the front end is okay. I think, you know, Marzocchi Z2, it's basically a simplified, longer service interval Fox 34. The rail damper is a little bit less, I wouldn't say, is competent the right word? It's just a little bit more, it's little bit less settled once you get into faster and repeated hits. It doesn't kind of hold up quite as well as the damper on the Fox Rhythm fork, but still very smooth, doesn't need a lot of attention. But given how good the back end is, that's probably the operating limit in terms of suspension, is that fork is going to feel quite flustered quite quickly. And because it's such a long bike, it's harder to lift that front end out of trouble than it would be on a shorter bike. But on the other hand, because it's such a long front end, because it's such a stable planted bike, if you do start getting into issues with the front end, you can still, you know, save it. It's not a major drama. And then you've got Minion DHR2 up front. That is a 2.4. So again, that definitely plays into that double Downcountry rather than pure Downcountry, because they're a good grippy all-round tyre, but having them both ends definitely kind of digs into the rolling speed and sprightliness of the bike. But otherwise, 15.3 kilos, it's a decent weight. All frames come with a different linkage package included with the bike, so you can upsize it to 29 a rear wheel if you do want a faster roll in there, and you can get a Super Boost wheel to suit. And so yeah, I mean, it was decent value at full retail because Saracen made the choice to come out of shops and go direct to customer on their sales, which is why they suddenly got more aggressive on the pricing. But now at this reduced price, I think if you're looking for a classic UK, tough, ready to ride, whatever the weather, whatever the trails, trail bike, I think this is an absolute belter. So, hope that close-up look at this Saracen Ariel 30 has been helpful, so you can get a proper picture of what the bike looks like, how the linkage is set up, what the components are, and my views on all of that. But, like I say, you know, if you want to get an idea of how this bike rides, because it is, that's where this bike really shines. I mean, even though probably, you know, top trumps comparisons, this is one of the best specs you'll find for 1,600 quid at the moment. You know, it's really on the trail where this true value bike is. And while, like I say, this is 1,699 now, if you can pony up a few hundred more quid and get to around the £2,000 mark, you can get the Ariel Pro, which does come with a Fox 34 performance fork, and it comes with a full SLX drivetrain with an XT rear mech, and it comes with much more powerful Migura brakes as well. So kind of all the things I've said it would be nice to graduate towards on this bike come as standard on that Saracen Ariel 30 Pro. So if you've got a little bit more cash in the bank, then that's probably the one I'd go for. But don't think that there are any major compromises in having fun on the trail with this base model. So go watch the live ride if you want to see that in action. And I'm really trying to sort of get an almost complete bingo card on bikes in this sort of price range, because I think they're super important, because they're really, really good now. I mean, I have very little qualms about recommending any of these, you know, because 15.3 kilos, that's the same weight as a lot of carbon bikes, sort of 2-3 times the price of this. And really, on trail, I don't think you're going to notice much difference at all. And it's certainly stout enough. It holds the line really well structurally. It's very tough in terms of how that rear end's put together. And as I say, the suspension is an absolute work of art in terms of how much control it pulls out of 130 mil of travel with a relatively slim 27.5 rear wheel on there. So that's me chatting on in the workshop. Obviously, if you think there's anything I've missed, fire away in the questions, in the comments. If you've ridden this bike yourself and have got some feedback, that's always super useful. If you ride a bike in a similar category, again, really, really useful to hear about that. Let me know what you think about Super Boost. But yeah, I mean, it's great. The comment section is becoming more and more of a kind of community of people just chatting about all aspects, about riding, about specific bikes, about parts of bikes. So crack on. That's great. You know, I'm really proud that it's kind of becoming a home for people talking about what they prefer on bikes, as well as me being able to add my experience and expertise into it. You guys can all get chatting in there as well and share your stories and your feedback and your input, and everybody then benefits from a much broader sort of perspective and experience base. But for now, I've been Guy Kestevan on Guy Kes TV, talking about the Saracen Ariel 30, and if you could do the subscribe, clicky, likey, notifications thing, that would be marvellous. And if the money you've saved from being told there are some great value bikes out there is burning a hole in your pocket, then there's always YouTube gifts and Patreon subscriptions for you to give me a consideration on the fact I've helped you find a bargain. But for now, I've been Guy Kestevan on Guy Kes TV, talking about Saracen's Ariel 30 base model. And if there's out more you want to know, get chatty in the comments.